Okay,
I'm gonna
and
wait for him. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. This is Tammy, and I'm excited that we have so many people on here tonight. And we are continuing our travel camp with Niki Sepsas, and we're headed to the Netherlands. As a matter of fact, Amsterdam. So this is our visa-free program, and I'm glad everybody could join us. Stay tuned afterwards for questions and answers. And then I will go ahead and share what is happening in August and September and save the dates for October. So I'm excited to have Nikki back again and welcome.
thank you very much, Tammy. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for inviting me back to join you here. I think my sound is good. Everyone can see the screen well. So we're interested in having a look tonight at one of the premier cities in Europe. And the timing is what's called the Dutch Golden Age. And we'll see this very tiny country, the Netherlands. Many people call it Holland. Holland is only one of the different provinces of the Netherlands, but we'll see how this small little town on one of the little canals here, that there's so many of them in Amsterdam, became this premier city during this premier age, the Golden Age. As Tammy mentioned, we've been continuing our program of traveling, stamping your passports there for you. We began in February with a look at Asia. We did a culinary tour through Asia, Japan, China, Southeast Asia, looking at some of the different foods that people enjoy over there. And then we came in Memorial Day in May. We saw how the 31 cemeteries in 17 countries around the world honor the American men and women who died in the defense of freedom. We began in June looking at the British Isles, the little kind of off the road British Isles, from the Shetland Islands in the north all the way down to Scilly, little islands there in the very southernmost part of the British Isles. And then just 4 weeks ago tonight, we did the program on St. Petersburg in Russia. We looked at the treasure of the czars. Well, tonight we're in the Netherlands, another stamp for your passport. Where are we? Well, there is Amsterdam, and there is a tiny little country bordering on the North Sea that is known as the Netherlands. You look at the different provinces there, and you see North and
Up,
South.
Mr. Nikki, you have to share your screen. You haven't done that yet.
I'm sorry, Tammy, I missed
I
that.
don't think you shared your screen yet.
I see it.
Oh, you do? Oh, I
Mhm.
don't see it.
See the map.
Oh, well then I'm sorry. Then I will see it on another screen. Okay, my bad.
Are we advanced? Okay, you can't see everything. Okay. As you'll see, the North and South Holland are two of the provinces of the Netherlands. So sometimes we talk about Holland, we should be saying the Netherlands. Now, when we look at let's go back to where we were all the way through. That had started us back over, Tammy, evidently, when we were talking about you're not able to see photographs. There we are at Amsterdam. There are the Netherlands, and there are the provinces of the Netherlands. Now, Amsterdam is the capital, but you'll see the other cities, The Hague and Rotterdam, also very important cities in the Netherlands. The Hague, with many of the European Union organization based there, and Rotterdam, the larger port. Now, notice one thing that's interesting. Amsterdam, as large a port as it is, and Rotterdam, the largest port, neither of which are actually on the ocean. They're connected by canals to the North Sea. When we look at the low countries, to talk about Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, looking in Netherlands at a little over 17 million people. Now, about 10% of those live in the one city of Amsterdam. And look how many of them live below sea level. How much of that country has been reclaimed from the North Sea? 21% of those 17 million people live below sea level. It's remarkable the engineering work that they have done to reclaim that land. It's full-time windmills and these pumps that are operating now, where 17% of the country was formerly underwater, formerly part of the North Sea. And when we talk about the Netherlands, it is a kingdom, it's a parliamentary democracy, one kingdom, four countries. The kingdom, of course, in Europe. And look at the different countries that are outside. We have three little islands, Bonaire, Saba, and St. Eustatius down in the Caribbean that are listed as constituent countries. Three other islands, Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin, are listed as special municipalities. They have their own flag, whereas Bonaire, Saba, and St. Eustatius fly the Dutch flag. Now, the special municipalities are pretty much independent, even though they're part of the Netherlands. They are under the rule of the king. And here is the flag. Now, you notice the French flag has the vertical stripes. The flag of the Netherlands is the horizontal, red, white, and blue. And as flags go, it's not an old flag, 1815. That's at the time when the Netherlands came out of control of Napoleon Bonaparte. He was exiled after Waterloo, and they had an independent kingdom of the Netherlands. But the earlier flags go back a couple hundred years. The state flag, Stadtflag, 1648. And then the orange flag from the House of Orange, 100 years before that. The Prince's flag, Prinsenflag. New one here has also the crest, and it's listed as a democracy, parliamentary democracy. It has a king with a constitutional monarch. Now, the king is this man, Willem Alexander, from the House of Orange, very old royal house in Europe. Now, William Alexander is what he goes by, but he's got a lot more names. With his royal cloak, he'd be William Alexander Klaus George Ferdinand. His beautiful wife, the queen, is Queen Maxima. There is the royal family together there with the mother. Now look at what's taking place in Amsterdam. You notice again, they're far inland. There's about 1.5 million people there. Again, almost 10% of the population of the country living in that one city. And look where they are, 7 feet below sea level. Again, the incredible work that the Dutch engineers have done to pump the water out, reclaim the land from the North Sea. Now, they were so good that when Hurricane Katrina hit in 1995 in New Orleans area, it was many of these Dutch engineers who helped redesign some of the canals in the New Orleans area to help them put them up where they should be, like they are in the Netherlands. This is the flag of Amsterdam, kind of an interesting design here. This is the red, black, and then these 3 crosses in the center of that. There's a couple of stories as to how they began. One said the story of the crosses of St. Andrew. St. Andrew was martyred on a diagonal cross. The patron saint of Scotland is one of the patron saints here. So they'll have his flag, the diagonal cross of St. Andrew, in the middle. Another story says that it was one of the very few places where they could ford the Amstel River. They needed to get across the rivers in those days, and that was one of the places where they could. And it is a very new flag. 1975 is when it was officially adopted. Now, about 50 years before that, you may have seen it flown in 1928 when it was hosting the Olympics there in Amsterdam. We're hosting today in Tokyo. They will be there as well. Now, here is the royal crest of the city. There is the crown. There is the flag underneath it, the lions, and what means valiant, steadfast, and compassionate. They try to be all 3. Now, we talk about Venice. This is what they call the Venice of the North. It's similar to what we talked about in St. Petersburg, but on a much grander scale. Look at this, 1,200 bridges. It's about 1,400 in Venice, and 90 islands, 100 kilometers. That's over 60 miles of canals. When you look at it from the air, you really get a sense of scale of how much water is Amsterdam. Now, people have been living there for about 3,000 years. They found remnants of the Neolithic people who lived in what was pretty much a swampy area. This peatland, this mire, the quagmire, that's still in the countryside when you look at much of it today. Now, to reclaim much of the land from the sea, they began pumping about the 10th century, 1,000 years ago. Again, pretty remarkable engineering to be 1,000 years old from what they were doing. And in the 12th century, we would see the bridge over the Amstel River, and that would lead to its name. Amsterdam became Amsterdam. That bridge that you see from 1173 has its counterpart today. It's one of the big bridges. They have redesigned it, and it is in operation today. Raises and lowers for people coming over the Amstel, one of the many canals in Amsterdam. Now, for about 200 years, it was part of the Hanseatic League. There is Amsterdam, and stretching along the coast of what is today northern Germany, all the way into the Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania areas. This was a kind of a precursor of the European Union. They banded together as a Hanseatic League for commerce. It was about that time that Dutch was entering its golden age. What was happening? Well, the mariners of the Renaissance, about 100 years before, were redefining the traditions of exploration. They would leave their safety of their home ports in the Mediterranean, sailing beyond what they call the Pillars of Hercules. That's the Straits of Gibraltar. There's Gibraltar on the left with Spain, on the right is Morocco. They went out into the great unknown that was the Atlantic Ocean. The same thing was true of the people in Spain and in Amsterdam when they left their relatives safely and moved out into this Atlantic Ocean. It was a question mark to the people of those days. And what led them to enter this great unknown? Why did they leave? And why was it at this particular time? Well, we answer that looking to the east. The great city of Constantinople, founded by Constantine the Great, named it after himself, Konstantinos, the Greek word for Constantine, and Polis, the Greek word for city, the city of Constantine. It stood for 1,000 years after the fall of Rome in 476 as the eastern capital of the Roman Empire. And then a hard-charging 26-year-old cavalry officer from the Ottoman Empire would bring a gun the likes of which the world had never seen before. They called it the Bombard gun. And Mehmed II, leading the Ottoman Turks, laid siege to the city in April of 1453. Well, a month later, the city fell. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Christians were gone, and now the Muslims would take control of the great city of Constantinople, the crossroads of East and West. That meant that all of the silks from China, from Japan, from the Indian subcontinent, the spices of Southeast Asia, literally worth their weight in gold from the markets in Europe, were now no longer available to the Europeans. They had to look to the West to arrive in the East. Well, the people in the Iberian Peninsula, the people in Amsterdam said, yes, we can. We'll sail west to arrive in the East. Of course, the very first one to do that was Christopher Columbus. Now, he would be one of a number of these mariners, including the ones from the Netherlands, who would change the course of history. How important was their work? This is a lithograph of a man named Bartolomé de las Casas. He was the man who kept a journal of what Christopher Columbus had done. He had been a conquistador, and he was so appalled at what he had done and what he had seen of the wholesale slaughter of the inhabitants of the West Indies, that he joined the church and he would write about what had happened. He said, everything has happened since the marvelous discovery of the Americas has been so extraordinary, it overshadows all the deeds of famous people, no matter how heroic, and to silence all talk of other wonders of the world. And he was exactly right. The Iberians, the people of Spain and Portugal, the two great superpowers of the day, would be the ones who would lead. Pretty soon, the Dutch, the French, and the English would catch up. These mariners of the Renaissance, led by Christopher Columbus, a Genoese sailor sailing under the flag of Spain, would be joined by Vasco da Gama, the Portuguese, another Portuguese, we would know him as Fernão Magallanes, he's now Ferdinand Magellan, sailing under the flag of Spain. And then there would be another Italian. All these Italians are freelancers. There was no Italy at the time. There wouldn't be Italy until 1861. So Giovanni Caboto would anglicize his name to John Cabot, would sail under the English flag. And then another of his countrymen, Giovanni Verrazzano, we've got the Verrazzano Bridge in New York Harbor, would sail for the French. They were soon joined by all of the other adventurers, the freelancers, who would finally start penciling in these unknown parts of the world, from Columbus and Magellan, all of these others here. They would be joined by the Dutch in what would be called the Dutch East India Company. Again, this is a commercial outfit. The VOC is what you'll see in the Dutch language, the Flemish language of Dutch East India Company. And what they did was to compete with the French, with the English, with the others for trade and for the colonial outposts that they would find around the world. The very earliest days of the 17th century in Amsterdam, they were building ships that would go out into this great unknown and start marking what was the Atlantic Ocean. For 21 years, they had a monopoly on this. This is Southeast Asia. Today, the islands of Indonesia, Malaysia. In those days, it was Java from all of the great spices. Well, pretty soon they would put up the Dutch flag here on the Indian subcontinent, there at the tip of Africa, over here on the South American continent in a couple of places, along with different islands in the Caribbean. They could go around the Cape of Good Hope, or they could go through the Straits of Magellan. the Dutch for a long time, over 20 years, would control both of those routes. Now you could see then very quickly the Dutch East India capital in Batavia, what is the island of Java. We would see from Ceylon, from Southeast Asia, over here on the boot of Arabia. Pretty much the Dutch flag flying in all of these places with their home port in Amsterdam. Now, this is an early flag of some of the earliest explorers who went down into what is today Australia. They even call it New Holland. One of the first explorers there was from the Netherlands. Here's a name that you know as an Englishman, but he would sail for the Netherlands. What happened? Well, he was a great explorer, a navigator, and the Dutch paid better. He was sailing for the English, and there you see the Dutch flag, the orange, white, and the blue. Pretty soon he found that the Dutch paying better, he would sail under the Dutch flag. And he did quite a bit of sailing and exploring for them. Now, all of these adventurers were looking for this Northwest Passage, an all-water route across North America. They never found it. It wouldn't be until 1903 when a Norwegian named Roald Amundsen made a 3-year journey locked up in the ice in the Arctic, where he finally made it across North America through a sea route that was unknown to the Europeans, but they were all looking for that. In the early part of the 17th century, here comes Henry Hudson sailing from what is today Delaware all along the coast of what is today New Jersey, New York, and into even Halifax up in Nova Scotia. He's looking for this Northwest Passage. He never found it, but he did plant the Dutch flag in a number of places, including what they would call New Amsterdam, which became Manhattan, which became New York. But pretty soon he's back again. 1611 was his second journey. Made his way over here, and that's the last we would ever hear of Henry Hudson. What happened? Well, after spending a winter up in Hudson's Bay in the frozen ice up there, his crew had enough. They put him in a boat and set him adrift. So the great explorer from the Netherlands, from England, is now gone to history. 1611 was the last we would see of Henry Hudson. But he left his mark all the way from Delaware into upstate New York and Connecticut and Rhode Island. Many of the names of these towns up there: Schenectady, Wiltwyck, New Amsterdam, Fort Nassau in New Jersey. All of these settled by the Dutch after Henry Hudson. We see the Dutch flag in throughout the Netherlands. Okay, there it was in New York, moving down into Curacao, into French Guiana, Dutch Guiana, along the coast of South America, even competing with the Portuguese in what would become Brazil on the east coast of South America. All of that would take place after the Spanish would finally be defeated in 1588 by the English. The great Spanish Armada was defeated. Now it's time for the French, the Dutch, and the English to take the place of Spain and Portugal. Here is when Amsterdam became the wealthiest city in the entire world. All of the riches coming back from the New World, all of the outposts of the Dutch around the world were fueling tons of money into the city on the North Sea. The very first stock exchange in the world. This is pretty remarkable, and it's still a very important site on the tourist trail today, the financial center. There is the stock exchange in Amsterdam today. We would see the Dutch defeat the Spanish again in the Battle of Gibraltar. The British had defeated them in 1588. Now the Dutch off the coast of Gibraltar finish off the Spanish fleet. So it's now the French, the Dutch, and the English that pretty much supplanted the former superpowers of Spain and Portugal. 18th century trade routes led by the Dutch, joined by the French and the British. In addition to planting their colonial flags and claiming many of these areas, they were bringing back the wealth from all of the places they were visiting, especially Southeast Asia. By the 18th and 19th century, the great golden age of the Dutch is starting to wane. What happened? Well, they started fighting among their old allies, English and the French. And then when Napoleon came along, picking up the pieces after the French Revolution, most of the Netherlands, along with the rest of Europe, came under the influence of Napoleon Bonaparte, part of the great French Empire. That ended in 1815 with Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, and all of a sudden we have the reappearance of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, now United Kingdom of the Netherlands, from 1815. We have a second golden age that began about the end of the 19th century. What was happening? Infrastructure. The great North Sea Canal over here, moving from the North Sea into almost downtown Amsterdam. There on the left, you can see the port of Amsterdam, Westport it's called, where most of the commercial shipping, you have even some of the smaller cruise ships, like the one I'm on, will go all the way into the downtown part of Amsterdam itself. There is Westhaven from the air. All the commercial shipping taking place out of there, most of the cruise ships coming closer into downtown. Now, with that North Sea Canal, they're able to connect with another several canals along with the Rhine and the Danube River to create a wonderful route from Amsterdam all the way to Budapest in Hungary. You can get on in Amsterdam on a riverboat, travel through about 7 different countries, along with these different canals that connect the Rhine, and the Danube River, and you'll end up in Budapest. It's one of the most popular cruise itineraries because it takes you some of the most spectacular scenery in mainland Europe. You're not cruising on the islands, you're right through the heart of Europe. This is the Wachau Valley. Here, the castle-crowned hilltops. We see many of the little medieval villages. This is where the Main and the Rhine River were coming together. You can see the different colors of the water. When you look at the vineyards, some of the great wines of Germany on hillsides that are so steep, the people that work these vineyards sometimes are covered with ropes there that they let themselves down to work on those vineyards. Here are the Lorelei Rocks, one of the premier of the tourist sites there on that route, all the way to Budapest in Hungary. Look at Amsterdam today and so many of the sites that I'm sure you have seen, you're visiting there, and I hope you get a chance to see if you're planning a trip there. Amsterdam today is great seen by boats. All of these canals, these huge number of canals there that they have, and the rivers, making a wonderful sight on these boats. Whether you opt for the English, the French, whatever language you want, they'll have these glass roof boats that take you along the canals to see some of the premier sites. And much of what you see is people living right on these boats on the canals. Now, just like New York City that has 5 boroughs, Amsterdam has their boroughs as well. It's got about 8 of them here, and the central one, Amsterdam Central, is where most people begin. That is the train station. If you're arriving from the airport, by cab, you're going to the train, whatever, it's a central area for meeting. And this, we talked about bicycles earlier. Instead of car parks, look what they have. Bicycle parking station, Bicenthalen. Okay, there is where they'll have literally thousands of bicycles. How do you find yours? Well, it's not easy. 400 kilometers, that's about over 200 miles of bicycle trails. And they're much more conscious of bicyclists than we are here in the United States. People are getting around on bikes, they park them, they leave them. Well, how many bicycles? How about 1 million of them? Okay, there's 1.7 million people. That's almost 1 bicycle for every person in town. Many of them have several of them. Now, there are about 2 million kilometers people log every single day. That's about 1.2 million miles that these people are bicycling every single day, regardless of the weather. Much easier and very much cheaper to get around on a bicycle. Now, 17 million people, 18 million bicycles. And here's one of our bicycle groups on a pretty nice day here, just making its way across. The only hills you go under or over as if there's a bridge anywhere. It is totally flat. Now, you got to be careful. 54,000 are stolen every single year. And they register the bicycles just like we register our automobiles and trucks here in the United States. You park them, you lock them up, or some people just leave them. Sometimes you take the seat off, you're not going to bicycle away if it doesn't have a seat on the bicycle. It's a little uncomfortable. But going around the canals, you'll see mostly vehicles that are service vehicles. Everybody else is bicycling, walking, or going on the canal boats that cover just the one on the left, people live on. It's not unusual to get your mail right there. That is your home for as long as you are in Amsterdam. Now, the canal boats, again, specially designed to go under these hundreds of bridges that connects these different canals through there. Here, a bit of a rainy day, well, they just closed the windows there and you're moving around, looking at all the sites with your tour guide, talking to you in whatever language that you have chosen. At night, they are spectacular. They light these up, because sometimes people like to do the tour on the canals at night. Other times, you're just walking through the city from your hotel, visiting different restaurants, shops, and the different bars. Wonderful place. Look how they light it up. All these little apartments where people are living, the little commercial areas, the churches, the steeples. Just make this particular one, we had a night where there was absolutely no wind at all. You can turn this upside down and try to figure out which is right and which is up. Two of the premier sites that we always start our visit with, here is the Basilica of St. Nicholas, right in the center, and then the Schrierstoren, much smaller on the right-hand side. I want to spend a moment talking about each of those because they are two of the premier tourist sites in downtown Amsterdam in the central part of the city. From the 19th century, they had this one. The designer, Adrian Benchus, put what he calls St. Nicholas inside the walls. Okay, it was the Church of St. Nicholas, the patron saint of mariners and children, inside the walls of the city. It's a magnificent cathedral. It became a basilica. And I asked the priest inside, I said, when does a church become a basilica? He said, when it becomes a pilgrimage site. And it has become a pilgrimage site here. So we'll go to see the Church of St. Nicholas. One of the towers lit up at night. There's a little canal here, just an excellent view of how beautiful the area is at night. And here is the Schrierstoren, much older, dates from the end of the 15th century. This is the tower from which all of the women waved goodbye to their men from the Netherlands who were leaving Amsterdam on their voyage of discovery and colonization around the world. Schrierstoren translate as Tower of Tears. Schrier is the tears, tower is Toren. So the Schrierstoren from 1487, very historic spot. You see much of the history, and they're great about putting this in different languages where you can understand what happened in these particular places. And there Henry Hudson, along with many of these other mariners, waved goodbye to the people at home from the Schrierstoren, the Tower of Tears, sailing off. Here, the mountain in the back is South Africa. That's Cape Town, and that's Table Mountain. Look how flat it is. Here, Hudson and all of his sailors sailing in these areas. This is the downtown heart of the city, the Dam Square. You'll see the City Hall, dates from the middle of the 17th century. Again, this is something that Americans love because they see a great work that goes into each of the municipal buildings. And not just the Netherlands, we look at Germany, Switzerland, Great Britain. Our municipal buildings, our government buildings are pretty much nondescript bits of concrete and mortar. Not here. Here you find the great buildings that are museums, all of the towers that you have that are the municipal buildings. This is one of the most popular museums, the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, right there in the heart of the square. And a tribute to America's culinary heritage, Burger King and McDonald's. There you see the golden arches just about everywhere you go now. And they are in downtown Amsterdam as well. This is called the Oude the Old Church, 1306. Again, 150 years before we're even thinking about the New World. Here, these people were already in the Middle Ages of the Old World, the Old Church. Old Church as part of the West Church, the Westerkerk. This one is larger, it's newer, and it's more famous because of where it's located on the canal. Now you can visit that church, the Westerkerk, go inside and visit, and go all the way to, sometimes they'll let you go into the tower, see how high it goes. But it's a building that's just to the side of there, which you see people constantly lined up to go into. What's going on here? Well, this is the home of probably the most famous of the inhabitants of Amsterdam, Anne Frank. Officially, it was Annelies Marie Frank. Annelies Marie Frank. One of the tragic stories there of World War II is this little girl, born in 1929 in Frankfurt in Germany. She had a sister who was 3 years older. Margot was born in 1926. Now their father, Otto Frank, decided things are changing in Germany. We need to think about leaving. And things did change. In the 1930s, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came to power. By the late 1930s, they had firmly entrenched in power. Well, we could see the alliance with fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, the road fast moving toward a war. So when she was only 4 years old in 1933, Otto Frank moved his wife and the two daughters to the Netherlands. Now in 1941, Germany stripped them of citizenship. All the people who were living outside there were no longer Germans. But things would change in 1939 when finally Hitler ordered his troops to invade Poland. Now, after a valid defense, Poland did capitulate and they would be occupied. We would see things quickly change throughout the rest of Europe. April, and we'd see Denmark and Norway collapsing. And pretty soon, it was followed by the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Belgium, the Low Countries, fallen in May of 1940. And then the ultimate defeat was in June of 1940 when France fell. The troops of Adolf Hitler marched right down the Champs-Élysées and the Arc de Triomphe there. And Germany is in control then from the Arctic all the way to the border of Spain. And what about the Frank family? Well, this is her picture when she was just in the 1940. Okay, she's just 13 years, 14 years old here. This is 1941. So she was realized, and her father realized what is happening here in the Netherlands, controlled by the Nazis, rounding up the Jews and sending them to the camps. It was finally in July of 1942 where her father said, it's gotten to the point where we're going to go into hide. They couldn't leave the Amsterdam or the Netherlands. Where did they go? Well, they hid in the building where Otto Frank was actually working. There is the bookcase that's part of the museum piece today, the actual bookcase that was slid back and forth so the family could hide. And they hid there for 2 years. And think what a tragic thing is. The things that were most valuable and most precious to this little girl was her marbles, her little tea set, and her cat. Now, of all that they were stripped of, that's all that she had. That was her world. She gave them to a friend of hers. She said, I'm worried that they may fall into the wrong hands. Now, here's a family that's hiding every day of their lives to keep from getting sent to the death camps. And that's what she's worried about. This is the last photograph that was found of little Anne Frank, to get out just for a time to get a breath of air, but to hiding there for 2 years. Finally, they were discovered, and the entire family was shipped off to Bergen-Belsen, one of the deadliest of the camps. Now, it was there that Anne-Marie, her sister, and her mother would die. They were separated from the men, and remarkably, her father survived the time in the camps. Look how many thousands did not. 50,000 of these displaced persons, 20,000 Soviet prisoners. Well, it was typhus that probably the cause of death for so many of them, including Anne and her sister and her mother. So by 1944, she is dead. 1945, it was the Canadians that would lead the Allies into Amsterdam. The city, after all the years of occupation, is now liberated. Well, it was a few years after that when her father returned to the home and he found the diary that Anne had kept, her daily diary. And that is what he had published in 1950, The Diary of a Young Girl. It talks about Anne Frank and what they endured during the years that they hid in Amsterdam from the Nazis. It's on display there, and it's really a treasure for the people. The Rijksmuseum. Well, if there's any more spectacular, you could talk about the Louvre, the British Museum. The Rijksmuseum, a couple hundred years old, and look what it has. Right there in the heart of Amsterdam South, it's just south of the central part of the city, is one of the great museums of the world. It looks like a castle. It was massive, right there on the canal, radiating in different directions. You'll never see it all. You make plans to spend a day there, you'll still see just a smidgen of the 1 million art. Think of that, 1 million. Now, it doesn't compare to what we talked about last time, the Hermitage. So you could spend 30 seconds in front of every piece of art in the Hermitage, and it'd take you several years to see everything. But here you get a good look at what they have. Almost 3 million people went through there in 2019 before it shut in 2020 because of the COVID pandemic, when pretty much all the world had shut down. Here you'll spend some time. You can even have some refreshment as you visit different parts of it, especially where everyone is lined up to see The Night Watch by Rembrandt, one of the premier pieces that's there. Another museum, the Van Gogh. Look how much different this one looks. Well, it's much younger. The Van Gogh Museum, Vincent van Gogh. Here it's in the same part of town. You can visit both of them in the same area in the southern part of Amsterdam Central. There, Van Gogh's self-portrait, and who cut off his own ear. It gets about 1.6 million visitors before it shut down. It is cranked up again now, welcoming the world to see the works of Van Gogh. And she'll talk about the great art theft that took place in 1991. Here's the Diamond Center. This is worth a visit for a lot of people, even if you're not shopping for diamonds, looking for diamonds, but to see the incredible work that these people are doing, many of them from Israel, who've just done an incredible job of cutting these stones, mounting the stones, putting them in some of the remarkable pieces that they put together. Now, one of the things that Amsterdam is trying to overcome is its image as a spot where wide open for drugs. Now, my first visit there was right after I got out of the Army in 1970. I spent about 6 months just backpacking around Europe. And what we found was these little bars like this one and coffee shops where they were selling hashish and marijuana. This was a real shock to many Americans because, of course, it was illegal in the States. But here you could go into a bar, you could order some hashish, your little pipe, light up. They're still doing that, but what they're trying to do is discourage many foreigners from doing it because you don't know what you're buying. Here's a sign, the last time I was there a couple of years ago, it said you can buy cocaine on the street, but you don't know what it's being laced with. People are dying from this. Do not do that. So they're trying to get away from Amsterdam's image of a place of rampant drug use, even though it is. You can buy heroin. You see people under some of the canals just shooting up heroin and snorting cocaine. Other sites is the red light district. Now, this is something at Amsterdam. They're not proud of it, but they point to the low incidence in venereal diseases because they have licensed the industry of prostitution. And there along Canal Street, the center of the business, is where you can walk along. You see the women sitting in various stages of undress in the windows, beckoning you to come inside and spend a little time. And they have their shot card on the wall. They have their vaccinations. They have a city license on the wall. Tells you that they are licensed. You can't be on the street soliciting, but they are right off the street. Sexy land. Walk in, have your fun. Here is what we always do when we're visiting Amsterdam is some of the cheese manufacturing in the heart of the city. The Dutch love their cheese. 250 million kilos. That's kilos. Kilo is about 2.2 pounds. So 500,000 pounds per year. And there's what they're doing, putting it out on the street, ready for transport around town. They love their cheese, but they love to export it. And some of the best cheese that you can find in the markets today is from the Netherlands. The Dutch consume a lot, 16 kilos, that's about 34 pounds for all the 17 million people in the Netherlands. They love to take you on a tour and show you how they're creating some of this cheese. The meticulous work in the different brands of cheese that they're creating, how much love, how much care goes into that. Much of it's still done by hand by families who have been doing it for generations. When we look at how it's being loaded and you say, what in the world is this? Well, this is the transport. Much easier to get around by foot, and that's what the guys do. They'll load up maybe 8 of these cubes on one of the little sleds, and they'll run it up and down the little canal streets. There they're being delivered. Now, the windmills, we talked about those for a moment. Now we're going to spend some time on how important these are and how they are a fixture of the landscape, not just in the countryside, but downtown Amsterdam itself. There are 8 of them in downtown Amsterdam. Most of those are just landmarks today. But they were very busy from 600 years ago. They used wind power to pump these polders, emptying the water out of these polders, reclaiming land from the North Sea. All of this water pumped out into the North Sea, the land they are reclaiming. And it was the work of these windmills. Draining these polders is still being done today, but they have, in addition to the windmills, they have some of the pumping stations like this one, very modern from the 21st century. Now you'll hear the stories about the fairy tales relating to some of the children's dyke, the great flood that took place, the cat in the cradle, supposed to be floating down the canal. Yeah, you've seen that one. We all read it when we were in school. Well, they're very popular in the wintertime when these canals freeze over and the Dutch enjoy their ice skating, a little figure skating there out on the frozen canals. And what you're seeing today alongside these windmills are the wind turbines with this relentless wind there on the North Sea, right there along the coast. They're generating a lot of electricity through these wind turbines. These are massive things. They're created, most of them, out of northern Germany. They're shipped around the world. Many of them, they ship right here into the Netherlands, which is just next door. Okay, we've talked about tulips. Now you're gonna get just overwhelmed with the color during tulip season. Now this is spectacular. 1 mile after another in season, you'll see these colors that are just every color of the rainbow you can imagine of the tulips. Now they are grown not only in Amsterdam, but from this part all the way into Central and parts of Southern Europe even. But Amsterdam is the city that's known for them. The Netherlands, 23,000 acres, 8 billion, that's with a B, 8 billion bulbs every year are grown, and they're for market. Now, here are the people working in the wintertime. These bulbs are coming up. They have to be lovingly maintained by hand for thousands of acres. Tulips and daffodils together. Again, if you're bicycling through here, it's hard to keep your mind on what you're doing, looking at all the great beauty all around you. They're blooming in spring, and that's when a federal inspector is going to look at each and every one of these fields. He looks at the plants to ensure that they don't have any diseases, aren't carrying any type of parasites, and then they're going to be off to the auction market. Now, what amazed me the very first time I saw this was they were cutting the bloom off. That's the beautiful color at the top. I said, what are they doing? He said, we're throwing this away. I said, no, no, no way. He said, absolutely. He said, we cut the blooms so that the energy returns to the bulb, and that's what you're selling. They don't care about the bloom. What do you do with it? He said, well, we load it on the barges, put it on the canals, and it's taken as compost. Everything is recycled. All of those beautiful red, yellow, white blooms dumped on the little canal barges and moved to compost piles. Now, we've talked about the wooden shoes that they wear, though. They're not just for entertainment. Talked to this man here. We were visiting his farm. He said, absolutely. If you had canvas or leather shoes, they would rot. We wouldn't get through a full season with them. That's why we wear the wooden shoes. So many of them you still see clomping around. Many of them today, of course, are going to the rubber boots, but some of them like to go the old traditional route with their wooden shoes. Now, this is Aalsmeer. This is the largest floral auction in the world. Two of the houses, Aalsmeer and Floral Holland, merged together and gave us a size of 10 football fields. Now think of that. Football field is 100 yards. That is massive. 10 football fields together. You go in there and you see something very interesting. They're auctioning these different flowers, not just the tulip, but all the other flowers that are grown there in those fields by a clock. So it doesn't have to be the top bid. You can outbid me if you're a lower bid at the right time. You have a clock that's running, and the right bid at the right time is what gets the sale. 16 million euros change hands every single day. 48 million flowers are brought out there for sale. They'll be on a refrigerated plane flying into Africa, to Australia, New Zealand, to the United States, and to South America overnight. All of these flowers are out. And then the ones that they have in their parks around town just explode in color during tulip season. That's why the Dutch love going out in Amsterdam, Rotterdam, all of their cities, and just taking pictures of their city parks. You go into the countryside on the bicycles, and again, it's hard to keep your mind focused on what you're doing. You see this great beauty everywhere. Here's one of our bike groups, little bike trails that you have. You don't have to worry about cars. Seeing the windmills passing through the great countryside. So all of these windmills, all of these beautiful flowers, all of this incredible history that we have dating back 1,000 years when this little town started pumping out the water and reclaiming land from the sea. The windmills that you still see today, part of the landscape and part of the history and part of their culture. Many of these in Greece, of course, are not working windmills anymore. Here in the Netherlands, they certainly are. You go up and down here in the fall, seeing these canal tours, another very popular time. You don't get the great color in the tulip fields, but you do have the fall season, beautiful scenery in and out downtown Amsterdam. Truly one of the great cities of the world. So with our sunset, we've come to an end of a 45-minute tour of Amsterdam with what I hope has inspired you to have a look at it if you plan to visit, and maybe resurrected some memories if you have been there in the past. So what I would like to do now, if you will unmute yourselves, then we'll go ahead and take any questions and answers there that you might have.
No. Can you hear me?
If you will unmute yourselves now, I'll try to answer your questions.
I thought I did.
You did.
We can hear you.
Okay. Several years ago, I was in Holland, and a lot of people don't realize that I believe it's the first Sunday in September, in Zundert, they have this festival where they do dahlias, not tulips, but dahlias. And they have this whole festival with these absolutely every neighboring town gets together and they make this float, very similar to, I guess, the rose parade. And they have these wonderful floats with different themes. It was just phenomenal, just phenomenal. I have a load of pictures that one day I'll have to share with you if you haven't been to Holland at that particular time.
So glad you got to see that, because that has become now almost a national holiday. As you mentioned, it's not just one little town, but all of those towns come together, parade their beautiful dahlias, their flowers, the floats. It's just an explosion of color, along with food and entertainment. It just really is a wonderful
Oh
time.
yeah, it's terrific. And we went there and we were able to see them getting these floats together, and putting the flowers. The whole town gets together and they have tables full of people that are getting the dahlias ready, and then there's another table with the food to food the people. And I mean, it was just absolutely phenomenal. And the floats are all different themes.
It's a few years ago, with the amount of beer consumed at that festival. They have some pretty powerful beer there and in the Netherlands and in Belgium, much more potent than our 5% alcohol content beer here. The ones that you find over there are a little more powerful than that.
You know what was also wonderful? When we went there the night before, they made sure that there were different people that spoke English sitting next to each of us, so that they would explain to us in English what was happening and what was going on.
Those are great memories that you have of that event.
Just terrific, yeah.
Any questions or other comments I can maybe help someone? Yes, ma'am.
What exactly is the tulip season there?
They'll start in May. You know, they're a little bit cooler than we are, but the height of it, when we did our bicycle tours over there, we're going in May and early June. Sometimes the color will come out before that, but they are in peak color about that time. Again, that's dependent on weather. Sometimes a little bit sooner, a little bit later, but by May, you really can't go wrong. They go all the way into June for some spectacular color there.
I remember reading that the tulip bulb was used to trade on this in a stock market, that the bulbs themselves were worth a fortune.
There's a couple of them. I believe we had touched on this when we were doing the program, or if we haven't, I'm going to do it for you in the future, of some of the most expensive flowers in the world. And there was a tulip that alone was from the 17th century.
Yeah,
it was several $1,000s. That one, and it's not the most expensive, but that particular one, yeah, it's really eye-opening to see what some collectors will pay for some of those flowers. It's amazing. Yes, sir.
When we lived in Europe, I had a sales agent in the Netherlands, and he asked me to come and visit some customers. And I spent a week, and in 1 week visited every retail shop in the Netherlands, because it's a small enough country that you can do it. And the only thing that I found difficult, every afternoon, we go back to his home and his wife would serve sweets. And I gained so much weight in that week, it was unbelievable.
That's a good memory as well, and you have to do some more exercise. Yeah, that's it.
And the other thing, and I didn't realize that they don't close the curtains on their windows. So when you're walking down the street, you can look into everybody's living room.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kind of makes you wonder where you're going to be walking around inside there, what you're wearing.
I know.
Keep your PG rating here. Other comments or questions? I can help anyone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
A couple of things. When I was there years ago, there was a restaurant called Five Flies.
Yes.
Is it still there?
It was, as of 3 years ago, my last visit.
And also you could get herring from vendors from the North Sea. They had these push carts, and you could get it from those vendors, and they were pretty good, if I remember right.
Very fresh fish right there. They have it there caught in the morning and served in the afternoon. They just do a great job with that.
And I think in order to get furniture to the top floor, they use sort of a crane to get it through the windows.
They still do that. I was looking at how narrow some of those buildings are. They're built up, not sideways. You don't have much room to maneuver. Even the Anne Frank house, when you look at it, if you go through there, it's not a very huge as far as sideways. It goes up like the other houses. And at the top floor, they would have a little winch that they would lower and bring up the different pieces of furniture to furnish the house. It's interesting to watch that when it takes place. Yeah. Space is at a premium there, so that's why they build up rather than out. Well, as Tammy mentioned, we'll be taking you to Rome here on the 12th of August. We hope you'll join us for that. And then what I'd like to mention is finally, I get to meet you guys. In November, we're planning on a tour that I do in Florida every year. And the cruise line, the other question that everyone asks, when are you going back to work? Well, in August, I'll be going back to work. After the third week of August, we'll be starting up in the Mediterranean for one of the lines that I work with for a 7-week contract in Greece and the islands in the Eastern Med. And then when I come back, we'll be playing on this tour in November that'll take me through South Florida. And we will be live and in person for you. So I get to do a live show there rather than just the Zooms that have had a chance. Enjoyed these very much, but really looking forward to meeting so many of you in person.
So are we.
Thank you.
Yay, yes.
I don't know if you realize that Holland sends flowers to Ottawa every year, 10,000 flowers, at least 10, no more than that. And because Queen Juliana during the war was born in Ottawa, we dedicated a certain room in the hospital so that she'd be Dutch territory.
Oh, wow.
So every year we have a tulip festival in Ottawa, and you go down the canal and it's all lined up. It's beautiful.
Oh, perfect. You got to see great sights there.
So we have a connection with Holland.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a good connection to have.
Yes.
Other questions, comments, anything I can help anyone with?
No, I hope everybody enjoyed that. I know I did. And the music, how about the music? Did you touch on a lot of the music?
Did not. It's really with the time constraints. There's so much that I have to cover with the culture and the art and the museums and the history that really it's a program for another. I'd shut it short if I try to include music in that as well.
Understand, definitely. All right, I'm going to stop the recording, everybody. Thank you all. Don't hang up, everybody. Stay on, but I'm just going to stop the recording.